Alien Abduction Files: What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know by Nick Redfern. This is an interesting book on the alien abduction phenomenon, published in 2018. And Nick Redfern's written a lot of stuff that's covers a pretty broad spectrum of paranormal topics. A lot of his work is very similar if you're familiar with the work of Jim Keith. A lot of it kind of follows in that same vein of writing style and content. This one is for this is actually one of his better books in my opinion. Now, as many of you have known from my previous reviews, I consider myself an alien agnostic. I don't really, that's one of those things that it's an extraordinary claim, so it requires extraordinary proof. And anytime I see something along the lines of when someone is using high technology to make us think that it's aliens, I think that requires even more scrutiny where any of the UFO, alien abduction, cattle mutilation phenomenon is concerned. I think we have to really be careful as we navigate that, because there's obviously a deliberate effort to deceive, so that has to be carefully separated out from our desire to believe that there are or are not aliens. So he takes more of it's kind of an assumed tone here, that he assumes that there most likely are aliens or something. He never comes out 100% on that, but he really tends to lean more that direction with this. But the reason I found this book really interesting is some of you that have taken an interest in some of the other books that I've talked about, you'll find this very interesting, that he talks about in this that there tends to be a tone in a lot of the abductees who have been shown these kind of end times kind of events, these very apocalyptic kind of narratives that seemed to be tailored to steer these abductees or contactees in a specific political or social direction. And I found that really interesting. After I read this, I ran down several of the books that he sourced in this, and one of them was that he mentions extensively, or not extensively, but mentions in here, is Whitley Strieber, I think I'm saying that right, who wrote Communion. Prior to writing Communion, I think he wrote this around 1986 or 87 or so. He wrote a book called War Day, and it's all about, it's him and another writer writing. In fact, they use their real names in it, if I remember right. And unfortunately, I don't have that one handy. Otherwise, I would have dug that out to talk about in conjunction with this. But the whole book is about him and this other guy as reporters traveling across the country after this limited nuclear exchange between the United States and the Soviet Union, and how that affected the United States. And showing basically that they survived this limited nuclear exchange, and the country's in the process of rebuilding, and it's kind of fractured the country into these different zones, and California has kind of started to become its own country. There's some really interesting stuff in that, especially when you know that Whitley Strieber wound up going in into alien literature and all that. But I found that particular focus in this really interesting. He also covers a lot of what's called the MILABs or MILABs phenomenon, of about a lot of abductions where there's an alien presence, but then there's also unmarked vans and military equipment and secret bases and that sort of thing. Very terrestrial phenomenon mixed with what appears to be alien phenomenon. So really interesting in that, and I think that particular angle kind of sets this apart, because he really gets into, gee, what are these guys being abducted for? What's the point? So there's some interesting information on that. This is one of those that I picked up at a local used bookstore and got sucked into and read, and as you can see, I've dog-eared it all the way through. There's all kinds of good stuff in here. Again, I'm not sure I agree with him 100% at times when he's taking the tone of kind of the assumed that aliens exist and are from another planet kind of tone. But that aside, I think this is a very important piece of the puzzle. And I say piece of the puzzle because as a standalone book, this is really such a narrow focus on the alien abduction phenomenon. I think this dovetails with a lot of other theories like Sergei Monast and the Project Bluebeam, and some of the other things like that that are worth looking into, and some of the other New Age kind of agenda stuff fits in with this. So anyway, definitely worth a look. And this is, again, I found it used here at Half Price Books. This is one you could probably find. It was put out by Disinformation, which is always kind of funny when you see that pop up. And again, this was published in 2018. So definitely interesting if you're into critical analysis of the end times kind of both the theology and that social trend as it relates to this kind of stuff and just alien abduction stuff in general. I think that's a topic that gets ignored just because it is so sensational. I think a lot of serious researchers ignore the implications of this, and they should not. They do so at their peril.